Catherine. So to start off, I would like all of you who have had a minimum wage job or currently have to raise your hands, please. Okay, so I see a lot of hands up, and if your hand isn't up, then you're just not paying attention. Okay, so this is a topic that affects a lot of us. Throughout the years, there has been much debate on whether or not people should raise the minimum wage. Many argue that jobs are simply paying too low, or that families aren't cutting it enough with these low-paying jobs. However, when analyzing the situation, it is important to take into account the effects of raising the minimum wage, which is why I'm here today, to state that raising minimum wage has negative effects on America. So raising the minimum wage has negative effects on America for three main reasons. The first reason is that raising minimum wage has negative effects on employment rates. The second is that it has negative effects on the economy. And the third is that it has a negative effect on the people. My first point, as I mentioned earlier, is that raising the minimum wage has negative effects on employment rates. Raising minimum wages forces businesses to lay off people, which therefore raises unemployment levels. And according to the New Economics and the Minimum Wage from Princeton and University Press, their research concluded that a 10% rise in the minimum wages could increase unemployment by 0.5 and 1%. And although that's not a lot, when you start raising minimum wage a lot, this eventually will add up. Also, recent findings of a number of new studies that were shared this month at the American Economic Association's annual conference in Philadelphia showed that the increments in the minimum wage from $6.75 to $7.50 in 2007 and the raise to $8 in 2008 reduced employment by about 12%. And the bump up to $10.50 in 2017 raised earnings for restaurants by 20%. However, it reduced unemployment by about 10%. Raising the minimum wage decreases hiring levels because employers aren't able to pay everyone as they used to. Also, economists from the University of Washington presented a paper on the effects of the minimum wage in Seattle, and they found that on average, the minimum wage increases have caused employers to reduce hours, which leads to a cut from employees' earnings by about $125 a month. Also, raising the minimum wage would encourage companies to outsource jobs to other countries, which would be much cost-effective for them. Okay, so my second point is that raising the minimum wage has a negative effect on the economy, and this is because it increases the price of consumer goods. Studies show that a mandatory increase of $15 starting wage would increase fast food prices by at least 1/4. It's really simple. When cost rises, businesses generally compensate by raising prices, and minimum wage isn't an exception. For example, an increase in McDonald's burger prices would make consumers probably go to Burger King or to Wendy's because it's cheaper. But when costs increase altogether in the industry, then firms altogether collectively raise prices. Also, raising the minimum wage increases poverty because low-income families aren't able to keep up with these raising prices, and they have much more to spend on. So my second point is that increasing the minimum wage reduces the likelihood of upward mobility. And to explain this, this happens when someone straight out of high school or with low skills begins making $15 an hour, and soon it makes it easier for them to catch up to someone straight out of college maybe earning $25. And if they keep increasing minimum wage, then it's going to be a lot easier for them to catch up. And eventually, the middle class is just going to become one middle class, and there's going to be a big jump to the first class, and there's going to be no third class. And my second and last point is that raising the minimum wage has a negative effect on the people. Raising the minimum wage decreases high school enrollment rates and increases the dropout rates. The American Economic Review found that higher minimum wages reduce school enrollments, and that high minimum wages are correlated with a greater likelihood of leaving school for work. Following a minimum wage increase, teens who are not enrolled in school are less likely to enroll in school because they think, well, why do I have to go to school if it's a lot easier for me to make money? And also, raising the minimum wage would create an inability among teens to develop entry-level skills, because a lot of these teens are the ones who are working these minimum wage jobs, but if companies aren't able and willing to pay them because they don't have the funds for it, because minimum wage is so high, then there's going to be no place for these teens to be able to develop their skills. So in conclusion, raising the minimum wage has negative effects on America because it has negative effects on employment rates, the economy, and people.
All right, trying to get everybody engaged by having us do the little survey is perfectly fine. Suggesting that this is a widespread issue that people are impacted by, that's pretty good. The propositions clearly identified. I thought you had a very clear preview at the beginning of the speech of what the structure was going to be, which helped because it got a little confusing in the body of the speech. I heard your second argument 3 times, so that's a little bit confusing. I think you probably just got caught up in your own numbering system and missed a couple of points, or repeated the number despite the fact that you're actually on the 3rd point, for instance, or that it was just a supporting point for one of your points. So it got a little confusing structurally. However, the evidence that you present is pretty solid. There's good statistical information at that first point, although a couple of the pieces of data seem a little problematic. I assume that you're quoting them accurately, but some of them seem like they are a little bit high, and I'd have to see the actual data to be able to tell you whether or not you are making the correct inference on it. That there's a relationship. I think you do a good job explaining that relationship, that it is at the degrees that you're describing. That's where I had a little bit of an issue, but I'd have to look more closely at the evidence to take care of that. I'm not going to be doing that. The refutation speaker will be doing that, so they'll be picking on those things. The supporting points are distinct, except that it's employment, the economy, and people. I'm going, those are a little ambiguous. Unemployment, that makes sense. That people would have difficulty moving up economically. I think that's what your second point is, that there's going to be a consequence to prices that people are paying. So maybe a different way of phrasing it. They are distinct, and I thought your third point was mostly. was kind of speculative about people getting access to jobs and upward mobility. And, at one point you say, and soon there'll just be a single middle class. I'm going, and why is that a bad thing? If we eliminate the lower class and everybody's doing well, I assume a lot of people would think that was a good thing. I think there's a problem with that kind of thinking that you don't really explain here, and you might actually be feeding people's belief that this is a good solution to the problem. It's nicely presented for the most part, and like I said, you did a good job citing all of your sources in the presentation too. So, thank you.